a Vermont town plagued by a hog-human monster.
It looked like a man except for a pig's head. It's terrifying.
The North Carolina Bridge with a hitchhiker from hell.
This girl looked like she had been in a car wreck. It was bizarre. It was creepy. It scared me to death.
A conspiracy story too bizarre to be believed, now revealed to be true. The secret government agency that used psychics on a supernatural mission.
Project Stargate was really like something straight out of the X-Files. It was a plan to psychically spy upon our enemies.
In America's far northeast, within the Green Mountains of Vermont, the countryside town of Northfield. By all appearances, Northfield is a quintessential New England village. A charming mix of farming families and college students. What's curious is Northfield's obsession with a most unusual beast. A Pigman monstrosity that's terrorized locals for decades.
It sounded like a pig squeal, and it just kept getting closer. And we were scared.
It was a massive, pink, naked figure that was part very muscular human and part pig.
In order to really understand Northfield's monster legend, you have to get out to the edge of town, to a place where the woods descend into a rugged ravine. A single winding road is the only way in, and the only way out. Locals call it the Devil's Washbowl.
I would not want to be in the Devil's Washbowl alone at night. It would be really easy for something to hide up there. There's caves, there's really, really thick underbrush.
It definitely is a creepy region. I mean, you're so isolated. If something were to happen to you up in Devil's Washbowl, there's a good chance someone would find you.
In fact, the Devil's Washbowl has a long history of very odd, pig-related encounters.
The strangeness started in 1971 when a young man, about 20 years old, disappeared from a farm on Darby Hill.
According to the legend, the young man handled his pigs with cruelty. One night, he met with a gruesome end.
Come get your food.
One variation of the story says that they never found a body. He had been eaten by pigs. The parents launched a search party and combed the area from Devil's Washbowl, pretty much all of western Northfield. He was never found again. Nothing ever turned up. No trace of him. That was that. But weird things started happening around the Darby Hill area. A farmer one night heard commotion, like his garbage cans are being gone through, like he had the old tin, the old metal cans, and he just heard something knock them over.
He figured it was a wild animal, perhaps a bear. What he saw next bore no relation to anything natural, anything known.
He goes out and he saw the naked body of a man, but it had the grotesque head of a pig.
What happened? What was that?
It was a pigman.
What?
After an encounter like this, a staid Vermont farmer might be hesitant to talk about the intruder. Who would believe him? Only Pigman wouldn't stay in the shadows for long. In the fall of 1971, local teens were at the Northfield High School dance.
Come on, I got a surprise for you guys.
I hope you brought vodka.
Yeah, where's the booze you promised? Of course I did. I got it. I'm in control.
A few of the rowdier kids went behind the school, up to no good, with a belly full of courage.
Great. I can't believe how lame that is.
They, went out there to drink beer, smoke cigarettes, stuff like that. And as they were out there, they heard weird noises coming from sort of beyond the sandpit where the woods crept up. And one of them had a flashlight.
What's that?
He shined it over, and they did not expect what they saw. They saw this creature, and it was kneeling down, eating roadkill, just like eating it raw, like ripping his teeth into it, ripping off the fur.
This giant, naked, scary thing. Squealing, but more like screaming, like a pig going to the slaughter.
The kids ran back and they were crying.
What was that?
So you knew something was wrong when a whole bunch of 15 to 16-year-old boys were openly crying in front of their high school peers, because that really just doesn't happen.
It was a pig, right? It was a pig?
After the encounter at the high school dance, residents organized a team to search some caves in the Devil's Washbowl area.
So they went up into one of these caves, and what they found was astounding. Inside the cave, they found a bed of matted hay.
God, what is that smell? That is wicked bad.
And they found a pile of just dead animals. Most of them were bones, though.
Is that a cat? God, guys, look.
This may have been evidence of the creature, but the search party didn't turn up the Pigman himself. Still, residents of Northfield swear he's there. Pigman, head of a hog, claws for hands, human feet. Where the man ends and the pig begins is anybody's guess. Stories of monstrous pigs go back as far as Holland in the 15th century, often tied to witchcraft and physical deformity. Over the years, various theories have circulated about the origins of Northfield's Pigman.
One weird theory about Pigman was this kid had a physical deformity, and shunned by society, misunderstood, he took up residence in the Devil's Washbowl.
It could have been a person who was living kind of in a feral way.
It might have been sort of like this mutated human, damned at birth.
The encounters have been reported time and again.
It was in the 80s. Devil's Washbowl became sort of this place where curious teenagers would go up to sort of get a scare and to look for the infamous Pigman. But it also became sort of another sort of destination, like a lover's lane. This one incident happened to this one couple that went up there. They were up there at night, and they were making out in the car.
The young fellas used to take their girls up there and tell them about the Pigman, and they could get their girlfriends to cuddle up a little closer.
They probably thought they were alone at last. They were wrong.
I got the bathroom.
That's so romantic.
When nature calls took on a whole new meaning.
The girlfriend was waiting in the car. All of a sudden, she heard like this noise, and she looked over, and her boyfriend had been thrown into the underbrush. She was freaking out at this point, and she started screaming.
The couple's screams drove the creature away.
Oh my God, what was that thing? I don't know. That was not a normal person.
The young man survived the attack,
Your shirt.
and his injuries would reveal an important clue about the Pigman.
Oh my God.
He said that instead of hands, he had like a set of two giant jutting claws that were like in the area where his hands should have been, which was an interesting detail. And he had the proof on his stomach.
Right up to the present, encounters with a Pigman continue.
We kind of heard some rustling, and all of a sudden, it looked like a man except for a pig's head. And he was naked, pale white. Oh my God, it's terrifying.
In Northfield, Vermont, the legend of a prowling Pigman has frightened and fascinated townsfolk for decades. Half human, half hog, 100% hideous.
Part of what's so terrifying about a half-human, half-pig animal specifically is that they are so much like us. They have skin like ours, they're highly intelligent, and it's an animal that we eat a lot that is turning on us.
Amanda Palger is a professional photographer and a Northfield native. She knows all too well the tales of the Pigman.
When I was 16, I was at a party, and my friends and I decided that we were going to walk down the Devil's Washbowl Road.
Check this out. Isn't this close to the Devil's Washbowl?
Exactly, dude. We should go find the Pigman.
No, there's no way that's real.
A really, really bad idea.
Come on, let's go.
Well, at first, it started out, as a joke. I kind of just thought, oh, this whole thing is just hilarious. There's no way Pigman could be real. So we started walking down the road. We probably got about a mile in, and it's in the middle of the night. It's very, very dark on that road. You can't see any moonlight. There's no stars. The canopy from the trees is so heavy that there's no other light getting in. We started noticing branches falling right in front of us.
Maybe Pigman did that too.
Yeah, I'm sure he did.
It was a little windy, so we figured, oh, it's probably just the wind knocking branches down, but we noticed it every, 30 seconds. There was a branch, and it was always right in front of us. And there's certainly no way that a coyote, a dog, or a bear would be throwing sticks at us.
Guys, I think I just heard squealing.
Look, relax.
My friend swore that she heard squealing.
You're just freaking us out.
I think I heard it too.
This is wicked scary.
We started getting really freaked out. We said to ourselves, what if we made him angry? What if he comes after us? Oh my God, what if the Pigman put these trees here?
Mark, you all right?
And we decided to turn around.
We need to get out of here. I can't see a thing. It's way too dark.
It's seriously dark out here.
One of my friends screams and says, I swear I just saw the Pigman. I swear I just saw him. She was scared. It looked like a man except for a pig's head. And he came out of the woods and he was naked and just white, like really, really pale white. It's terrifying.
Amanda's not sure what to believe about Northfield's fabled swine.
I do think something was throwing those branches at us. I definitely think there could be something up there. I am still really afraid of those woods and the Devil's Wash Bowl. I have no idea what's out there, and I wouldn't want to take the risk of going out there.
In the middle of North Carolina sits the small settlement of Jamestown. A community of barely 3,000. It feels like everybody knows one another. And there's one more resident known to one and all. She's been here for nearly a century.
I can tell you that the people who have experienced her believe in what they saw. They know they experienced something out there.
On the edge of town, a country road and what appears to be an ordinary bridge. It's actually a place that's caught in a limbo of another time. A night when a young woman lost her way home. Lydia the hitchhiker. Somehow, her fate became prisoner to this bridge, and she's been yearning to escape ever since.
The story of Lydia is one of those stories that never goes away, and for generations, children in this area have grown up hearing the tale of Lydia.
The infamous Jamestown Bridge. It was built in the early 1900s to accommodate trains along the Southern Railroad network. Less well planned was the narrow, treacherous road leading to the underpass.
Back then, there were many accidents. People say that there were many fatalities there over the years.
The bridge, known for its many hazards, has become even more famous for a hitchhiker. Her appearances at the bridge began back in the 1920s, on a night that held such promise, but turned into tragedy.
She was coming home from this wonderful evening where she had been dancing with her boyfriend.
Lydia, why in the world would you ever go to prom with me?
I didn't want to be an old maid.
Yeah, well, you could have gone with Sam. Or anybody else in town.
I didn't want to go with anybody else. I'm going to love you till the day I die.
And her life was cut short by this tragic accident. And you see this young woman, this tortured soul, who is out there at the underpass still trying to find her way home.
Over the years, dozens of people have claimed to have seen her or picked her up.
Desperate for a ride, hitchhiking on the road, any good Samaritan would want to help.
The first recorded story of someone picking up Lydia was in 1924. A man on his way home from the late shift saw the girl standing there beside the underpass.
Folklorists record his name as Burke Hardison.
So he pulls over on the side of the road. And that's when he is startled by her appearance.
Are you okay?
She appears beaten.
Do you need a doctor?
As if someone has beaten her up or she's been in an accident.
As he drives, he feels more and more dread and fear. She was silently sitting there, and he's getting more frightened. As he got closer to the street, she indicated that that was the street. So he turned down the street.
Wait here, okay? Wait here.
They arrived at a house on Johnson Street, near Jamestown.
What do you want? The door opened, and an elderly woman stood there. He said,
"Oh, ma'am, I'm sorry it's so late, but I do believe I have your daughter in my car."
The woman shook her head and said, no, that's impossible.
No, my daughter died years ago in a terrible car wreck on the curve down below the Jamestown Bridge.
And she picked up a picture and said, "This is my daughter, Lydia."
All these stories end in a similar way. The young hitchhiker, gone. As if she had never been there at all. Through the years, the roadside encounters with Lydia have turned more sinister and dangerous.
Imagine coming up on a hitchhiker at 2:30 at night. What should you do? This girl was on the side of the road.
You okay?
It was bizarre. It was creepy. It scared me to death.
In North Carolina, in the small settlement known as Jamestown, there's a bridge that seems to exist as a way station between this world and the next. Generations of travelers claim to have seen a young female hitchhiker. She never seems to leave. That's what Tom Beasley saw one night in 1972 when he was driving near the Jamestown Bridge.
I never believed the legend of Lydia. I was a non-believer.
That would soon change. One night, Tom and a buddy were returning home late to Jamestown from the nearby city of Greensboro.
We'd gone over there, I guess you could say, for a night in that town.
It was 2 a.m. as they drove the deserted road. Suddenly, Tom spotted something strange ahead.
As I was coming down the hill, the girl was standing on the side of the road.
At first, he didn't quite believe his eyes.
Then I passed her. This girl looked like she had been in a car wreck. Obviously, she's in distress. I woke my friend up.
You see a young lady on the side of the road?
And he said, "You're crazy."
There's someone back there. I think she needs help. I'm turning around.
We went back to see if the girl was still there. And we were going to find out what the problem was and, if she needed help. And at that point, my friend saw her on the side of the road. But this time she was sitting on the ground. Was this somebody that was just thrown out by the side of the road? Was this somebody that had been in an accident? So we pull over.
Hey there.
He has the window down. He doesn't say anything. I finally punch him. I said, "Say something." He doesn't say anything. So I punch him again.
David, say something.
And all of a sudden, he just says,
"Move the car."
I said, "What?" And he said, "Move the damn car." As we pulled away, she was screaming, "Come back! Come back!" It wasn't a normal sound. I mean, we were terrified. I mean, we got out of there as quickly as possible. And as we're on the road, I said, "What happened?" And he said, "You wouldn't believe it." Her face. He said, "It scared me to death, And we kept on going.
I know what that was. I think I know too.
It's like, oh my God.
Oh my God. We saw Lydia.
We were terrified. We were terrified.
Few have ever taken the time to try to figure out why Lydia is on that road.
What is so horrible about this story is that she is so young. She had barely begun to experience life before it was taken from her.
Michael Reniger, a local historian, was determined to find the truth behind the legend. Right away, Michael ran into a problem.
Of all the Lydias who died between 1900 and 1940, only one died in an automobile accident. This woman was Lydia J. Fields. She died in 1921. However, she was 64 years old.
Basic to the legend is a young woman dying by the bridge. One day, Reniger was playing music with friends when he stumbled upon what might be the real name behind the legend.
It was a song by the Country Gentleman, and it was called "Bringing Mary Home." When I heard the lyrics, everything just sort of fell in place. It's the same story, basically. At the end of the song, the lady tells him that her daughter died in a wreck just down the road and tells him he's the 13th one that's been there bringing Mary home. I was like, aha, Mary. I was stunned because this was the exact same story that people tell about the Jamestown underpass. The song provides more evidence that her name was Mary instead of Lydia.
And Reniger was able to find some supporting evidence.
I found 3 people who remembered an accident at the underpass in which a young lady was killed. They thought it was Mary or Mary Ann or Mary Jane, something of that nature. The only thing they were sure about was that her name was not Lydia.
And a check of the county records added further confirmation.
I soon found out there were thousands of women named Mary who died in the same time period in Guilford County. I became more determined than ever to find out the truth of this story.
He began to hunt for the hitchhiker's home.
I was told a story by a young woman who got in touch with me that she lived in a house in High Point with her parents.
The woman's family resided in an old house on Johnson Street, a street that's long been tied to the Lydia legend.
The young lady told me that one day she walked into the living room and saw an old lady stand there. And she was startled. The old lady looked at her and said,
"You look like my Mary,"
and turned and walked around the corner. When she looked, the lady wasn't there. She started asking questions of the neighbors, and someone told her that there was an old lady who had lived in that house until she died, and that the old lady's daughter had died many years ago in an automobile accident out in Jamestown. Her name was Mary.
Reniger thinks the names of the 2 ill-fated women, Lydia and Mary, one old and one young, eventually became entwined. And at least since the 1950s, Jamestown's phantom hitchhiker has been called Lydia.
People talk about the fear that they felt at that moment, how uneasy they felt being in her presence.
Move the damn car.
And the striking thing to me is how sometimes years later after their experience, they still feel this fear inside of them.
For nearly 100 years, in the small town of Jamestown, North Carolina, scores of people have had sightings of a strange-looking hitchhiker near a local bridge.
I think people are going to continue to see Lydia, the hitchhiker, because she's tied to that spot. That's where she died. She has to wait endlessly to be brought home.
Over the years, witnesses have tried to make sense of the terrifying teen in tatters.
I myself personally feel like sometimes, like in the case of the hitchhiker, they're rooted to that place. They're tied to the place where the tragedy happened, and they can't move on.
I think people can get lost in time. I believe something such as an accident, they may have trouble finding their way home. To this day, I still think back about that night, and I can hear the girl screaming.
Halfway between Baltimore and Washington, D.C., sits the Army base at Fort Meade. It once harbored a mysterious military unit, one that turned psychics into soldiers.
I was a psychic spy for the U.S. government. My job was to use my mental powers to collect intelligence from foreign threats in support of the U.S. government's goals and missions.
Declassified documents and first-person testimony finally reveals the details of a government-run paranormal program, codenamed Stargate. There are people who seem to possess extraordinary abilities, clairvoyance, telepathy, mind over matter. While many doubt these powers exist, the U.S. government actually took the chance they might be real.
Project Stargate was really like something straight out of the X-Files. It was a plan at the height of the Cold War to train people to psychically spy upon our enemies.
The military chose a handful of soldiers, unlike anyone ever equipped for combat.
They felt that they might be either extremely lucky or may have some bent towards psychic performance.
The idea was far-fetched. Recruits capable of remote viewing, an ability to project oneself psychically to remote locations or targets. If it worked, it would be ESP on steroids. Why was the U.S. government willing to dabble in these dark arts? Apparently, they were desperate. Desperate for information during the Cold War with the Soviets.
This was the early 70s. We're still in the height of the Cold War. Deep fears of a worldwide nuclear apocalypse. What the government was looking for was an alternative way to spy on the enemy that wouldn't be noticed.
Paul Smith was one of the government's secret remote viewers. Even for Smith, the program was baffling in the extreme.
There were times when remote viewing just fell flat on its face. But there were times when it worked really well, and that there was no doubt that we had gotten that information through psychic means.
Up close, the process looked about as complicated as entering a room and sitting down at a desk.
A typical remote viewing session looks almost like it was designed to put anybody else watching it to sleep.
The monitor would hand the remote viewer a sealed envelope with a target written inside. Neither of them knew what the target was.
Let me know what comes into your mind. Do you understand the instructions I've given you?
The remote viewer would begin to receive impressions of the target.
First thing is, you start getting what I call as fragments or bits of perception. Colors, tastes, smells, sounds, and you're getting all that down.
It's pretty much as exciting as watching somebody do a math problem. It's not all that sexy, but the results after the fact are, amazing.
We worked on all kinds of things. Soviet R&D. They would often run us on things like hostage situations in the Middle East. Chinese nuclear tests, and we were successful in doing that.
At one point, Paul Smith was actually asked by his superiors to try to see into the future. They wanted information on future attacks on the U.S.
So I sit down and I got this impression of this large metal structure out in the middle of the water. The structure was moving. I soon realized it's some kind of vessel. And in fact, I had the impression it was an American destroyer.
The USS Stark, a Navy frigate, is on routine patrol in the Persian Gulf, 85 miles northeast of Bahrain. Its 200 officers and crew had just passed Hump Day, the halfway mark of their 6-month deployment. The crew was in good spirits. Most were settled into their bunks below, full from a Sunday dinner of pot pie.
I even got an impression of celery sauteing in the galley. I mean, that smell was present. I got the impression of this.
There's an aircraft above.
Some way off in the distance.
The frigate's radar appeared normal.
So then the aircraft dropped one or two of these kind of long cylindrical objects with little stubby wings that made roaring, guttering sounds.
I don't want to see this. It's horrible.
At 9:07, a lookout on the deck spotted a bright white light on the horizon. By 9:09, it was all too obvious. The light was a missile, heading straight for the Stark. There's
smoke and flame, and the vessel kind of shivers and shakes and leans to one side, and there's fire hoses on the deck and people screaming, and almost kind of like chaos going on. It's really hard to explain unless you've experienced it yourself. It was like I was seeing them screaming.
It's horrible.
In Fort Meade, Maryland, a top-secret government mission, Project Stargate employed telepathic spies in a war against America's enemies. On May 15, 1987, psychic spy Paul Smith was in session, viewing in his mind's eye some sort of an attack against a Navy ship.
There's an aircraft above.
Missiles ripped through the portside hull and exploded inside the crew's sleeping quarters. Those who weren't killed by the initial blast soon perished in a raging inferno. The surprising thing, Smith's psychic session was ignored.
Let's call it quits for the weekend, okay?
No alarm bells tripped. No warning flags raised. 2 days later, on May 17th, Smith's horrifying vision would turn out to be true.
Tell your sister we're leaving.
Okay.
I was getting my kids off to school, and I get a phone call from our operations officer.
Hello?
He said, "You haven't seen the papers yet this morning, have you?"
No, I haven't.
So I open up the Washington Post. Front page, photograph of the ship. U.S. ship hit by 2 Iraqi Exocet missiles. And it was on fire, 37 sailors were killed. It was probably the most accurate remote viewing session I've ever done. And yet it happened 50 hours before the actual event took place.
Dad, what is it?
It was amazing.
Could have stopped this.
Though they were dabbling in the paranormal, perhaps his handlers couldn't run the risk of acting on it.
As viewers, we were often insulated from what happened further up with our data. Every once in a while we'd hear, went up the chain and nobody did anything about it or whatever, nobody believed it or whatever, and that would be annoying. The case with the Stark, if the warning had gone out, the radars would have been up, it probably would have saved 37 American lives.
There seems to be two sides to the remote viewing program. One was to legitimately spy on the enemies and to prevent them from doing us harm. The other side of the coin was the research that was undertaken into the UFO phenomenon and what that may have uncovered with regard to UFO activity on the moon, on Mars, and even right here on Earth.
Joseph McMoneagle was Stargate's first remote viewer, designated 001. Whereas Paul Smith had somehow managed to see something in the future, McMoneagle was asked to find clues to a past event that could not be explained. In 1982, an unidentified flying object was caught in military satellite photographs. Nobody could figure out what this object was.
And what I described was an oblique object that was essentially flat as a pancake, approximately 300 feet across, that made a hard right turn, 90-degree right turn at 14,000 feet. My sense was there was no life forms on it, that it was a fully automated vehicle.
Later, McMoneagle was asked to report to the Pentagon.
That's a UFO. That looks like a UFO to me. No. That is not a UFO. That is a high-altitude weather balloon.
There I was met by two, what you would call, I guess, two men in black. They showed me a blow-up picture of the object that I described, and I said, oh, wow, that's a UFO. And he got really angry.
For you, forever, that is a high-altitude weather balloon.
No, it's not. We're going to your command about this.
I think it's very likely that the object Joe McMoneagle talked about was some form of UFO. After all, when you have a 300-foot-long object that can do right-hand turns at 800 miles an hour, clearly we don't have the technology to build anything like that.
If McMoneagle's psychic powers sensed extraterrestrial objects, how much farther could they go? On May 22, 1984, McMoneagle was handed an envelope with geographic coordinates for a new remote viewing target. What he would see next became undoubtedly the most shocking revelation of the entire Stargate project.
Using the information in the envelope I provided, exclusively focus your attention. Now focus on 40.89 degrees north.
What follows are based on actual CIA transcripts of McMoneagle's incredible psychic discovery.
So I close my eyes, I empty my mind, and my expectation is that the next information that comes into my mind will be pertinent to the actual target I'm working on. And he gave me the first set of coordinates, and my perception was that it was a very large pyramid, and it was different.
Different because this pyramid is not in Egypt, not even on Earth.
I'm tracking severe clouds, more like dust storm. It's a geologic problem.
Once McMoneagle was in the psychic zone, a monitor was there to guide him.
Okay, go back to before the geologic problem.
McMoneagle finds himself connecting with an alien somewhere else in the solar system. A race of extraterrestrials in trouble.
The initial shock of remote viewing an alien for the first time, question everything that you know.
At Fort Meade Army Base in 1984, Joe McMoneagle was part of a secret government program, Project Stargate, attempting to use psychic spies to locate alien life forms.
I'm just seeing very large people, very tall and thin.
It's humans like us, only they seem to be much bigger.
McMoneagle's connection occurs at a critical moment in the lives of these beings. Their civilization is at an end. McMoneagle was somehow connecting to them through the vastness of time and space.
The information that I was getting from these particular coordinates dealt with a long past race of people that were human. I got a sense that something happened that disturbed the area that they lived in.
What is it they're waiting for?
Evidently, there was a group or a party that went to look for a new place to live.
Ask him if there's any way you can help him in his predicament.
Is there anything I can do to help you?
As hard as it is to believe, McMoneagle is certain he was staring at the ravaged end of an ancient civilization, preparing to leave with its remnant population.
Would you like to know what your target was?
Yes, I would.
Even more shocking, they're headed to Earth.
I think it's highly likely that we may be the survivors or the subsequent survivors of that particular species or that particular race.
The images continued to haunt McMoneagle, so eventually he decided to do a little research on his own.
I'd like to get pictures of these coordinates on Mars.
I went by JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab, and went in and handed the guy the card at the desk and said, I'd like to get negatives for these locations on Mars. And he took one look at the card and he said,
Oh, you want pictures of the old city?
And he turned around and pulled an envelope out and handed it to me. And I have to say that where I remote viewed a very large pyramid, well, in fact, there's a four-sided pyramid there. It's left me with enough information that I am sure that I was remote viewing something on Mars.
A number of researchers at Project Stargate believe that thanks to the remote viewing program, the US government has actually uncovered evidence of extraterrestrial life in our solar system, possibly even on our planet. If revealed, of course, this would be the biggest story ever, but it begs the question, why is the government withholding it?
If we all knew that aliens existed, the government would collapse overnight. And not just ours, around the world. Everything from religious institutions to, world governments, first world governments, would collapse.
As the details of this program are only now making clear, what began as an unconventional military experiment may have yielded earth-shaking discoveries.
I got a Legion of Merit from my government for providing information that could not be obtained by any other method on over 160 different targets. I know that remote viewing works.
It kind of startled me, really, the marvelous nature of what we were doing at Fort Meade, what actually had happened here. There was no other explanation than I had really been psychic during that time.